2. Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. I love talking to authors because they have the courage to take their thoughts and their stories or lessons and they put it down in a book for the world to read, ultimately changing their legacy and destiny in the process. And if you are out there and you want to write a book, check out Dream Starters Publishing. We can help you out with wherever you're at in the process. And if you have a book that's already done, you want to use it to generate leads for your business, check out bookmarketingcrm.com. Now, I'm excited to talk about this next book because it highlights the importance of culture. We just got off a call right before this with my team, and I'm so proud of the culture that we're building. There's certain core values that we live by, but the personalities, allowing them to shine. Your personality creates your personal reality. I've always believed that. It comes from a Dr. Joe Dispenza quote. And I think culture is extremely important because if you have the right culture, if you have a cohesiveness, you can overcome any battle. You can slay any dragon. And the book that we're talking about today, there are going to be many, but the one specifically is called The Cost of Poor Culture, the Massive Financial Opportunity in an Enhanced Workplace Climate. We have the author with us today, Mr. Nick A. Shepard. Thanks so much for being here, sir.
It's a pleasure, Mike. Thanks very much for asking me.
Well, let's start off with the genesis of this book. You have many books related to culture. What made you want to write this book specifically?
Experience, probably. I think we get to a time in life where we've accumulated a lot of information about how things work and how people react and what goes on in the world. And I had a background in finance. About 25 years of my career was in finance and general management. And then I went into started my own consulting and training business in 1989. And what I discovered over the years was, although we spend a lot of time running businesses by the numbers, what's behind the numbers is people. And really, we, especially accountants, I mean, we spend so much time worrying about trying to get costs down and minimize expenditures. And in the process of doing that, not only do we forget the fact that the people are the people that create value and make an organizational success, but very often the actions we take, like downsizing and layoffs and all of the types of typical cost reduction activities that accountants are very much behind, very often have a very negative effect on the organization and productivity and culture. So it was sort of that aha moment, like becoming a reformed smoker, that okay, now I believe. Now I believe.
One of the chapters, Reform Smoker, I like how you put that. Yeah, it's like it's the awakening, right? Oh, okay, now I see why
Yeah,
this
you
is
got it.
important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, you have a chapter in here well, before we get into that, give us a quick little background on like what made you fall in love with it. Was it something that you saw within the organization, or was it something that you witnessed as a child that made you fall in love with maybe just business in general? Like we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs on this podcast, and it seems like there's a general trend that we're rebels, we're outsiders, and maybe we just love creating something from nothing. So, was there anything in your childhood that made you fall in love with this pathway? Maybe a book or a mentor?
Yeah, no, not any particular one event. I mean, I think my whole life has been, impacted by a number of events that the cumulative result is the passion around, going back to people issues. I think we tend to forget about it. As a kid, we play with other kids, we have a great time. Everything is about relationships, and we have good relationships and we have bad relationships. But then we get into the work life, and sometimes we forget about some of those things, and we tend to concentrate on the profession and things like that. And I think I would honestly say I probably forgot over the years how important people were. And what happened was when I started up my own business, you begin to remember how important relationships are in terms of getting business and keeping business. And the other thing is that I also spent about the last 15 or 20 years of when I was running my consulting business, going around the country, well, internationally, doing professional development workshops. And it was just fascinating, the inclusiveness that you give to people to come up with ideas and thoughts and start discussions in discussion groups. It is just amazing, the creativity and the capability of people. I'll tell you one little story, Mike, that might be of interest. There was a time when I was the CFO of one of what used to be the large computer companies before the mini computer and microcomputer came out. And it was around $250 million sales at that time. And I had got moved from a divisional financial position into CFO of the whole Canadian operation at that time. And we had about 2,500 people, and we had a head office in Toronto. And I actually got the job just as they were moving into an expanded head office, and they had decided a couple of things. First was that we would have a totally new telephone system, and the second was we would do away with secretarial staff and replace them all by a systems approach where no longer would executives have secretaries or personal assistants. We would have people who in those days would do the typing and then the word processing, and the secretaries would focus on the relationships and the phones. Anyway, short, cut a long story short, it was an absolute disaster. The phones didn't get answered. People would call into the business. And it got to the stage where I, as the person responsible for that, essentially threw up my hands and said, I have no idea what to do. And so I went out to a number of the folks who were actually doing the work, the secretaries and the admin assistants, and said, I don't know what we should do. What do you think we should do? Can you tell me what we need to do? And they went off and they actually designed a recovery program, which we put into effect. In other words, we had the staff telling us as managers what it was we needed to do. And boy, oh boy, they fixed the problem.
Huh.
I mean, if you get people involved and you allow people to be part of the process, the ideas and creativity of the front lines is just phenomenal. And that was certainly a watershed to me that, wow, this works.
Yeah, you get people in a room where they trust each other and you allow them the free reign to come up with the solutions. I've realized this. Like, you got to let these horses run. And that's whenever it excites them to maybe figure things out on their own. You give somebody an idea that they don't believe in, and if it's not theirs, they will never perform it to the level that you have in mind. But if you give somebody the freedom to actually choose their path, give them the ability to come up with a solution and put the effort behind it, they're going to make sure with everything in their being that it maybe produces the result they desire. So that
Yeah.
type of honesty and transparency, if a culture can adopt that, gives them such a competitive advantage. Am I right?
Yeah, you are. But one of the most important things you used a word there is so critical. It's trust, and that is sort of the almost the secret potion, because what we have in not only organizations but even in society now, we unfortunately have gone into a situation where there is a declining level of trust. And in organizations, because large, I mean, you're probably in a really good position because you've probably got a number of people in your organization where that number is of a size that you can build relationships with the people there. They know who you are. They know they have interactions with you. You have built a relationship with them. You've built some trust. And so when you're against the wall and you've got some deadlines, you've got some problems, they don't look for the second agenda. They think, well, I trust Mike. He's going to tell me the goods. He's going to essentially, he's been honest and straight with me in the past. He's going to do that in the future. The problem is, the larger an organization gets, the more difficult it is to build that trust into that organization. You may have senior executives who think the employees trust them, but the only way that the employees are going to get a built relationship with those leaders is A, through their direct supervisor, and B, through the observations they make of how the organization is run. They don't necessarily have a one-on-one relationship with the CEO. And so in those cases, they can only determine their level of trust by what they experience in the organization. And unfortunately, what many people experience in the organization is poor communications, lack of tools and equipment, um, an unwillingness to collaborate and work together because, we have maybe conflicting goals and opportunities. Maybe we have an incentive plan where it's in my interest to get my goals done and screw you and forget your goals type of thing. And so we actually set ourselves up for not building trusting relationships. And if you don't have that, you don't have the foundation of a positive culture.
Mm. I was at an event last week in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was speaking to another speaker that was there. And he says, "Man, I think when I look at your brand and what you're putting out there, the way you put your political beliefs and what you truly believe out there, I think it actually costs you money." And I looked him directly in the eyes and I say, "Absolutely not. It's the opposite. It's not just me finding the right clients. That's only one half of it. It's having a team that trusts me to be transparent, honest, and also believe in the promised land that I'm trying to outline. And the only way I do that is if I be myself 100%. So if I hold back, most people in my organization would not trust me. And I think that a lot of people out there are trying to serve everyone. And then you know the saying, if you try to make everybody happy, you end up making nobody happy. And so when you own your identity, other people, the externals, the customers, the clients, but they believe in you maybe a lot more because it's an emotional buy. Hey, I'm going to trust this person because they think like me. They don't hold back. There is no filter. But the team, there's got to be a common ground. There's got to be a common warrior spirit that bonds us. And I've noticed that within my organization, very different people, very different, but there's many of the same beliefs that are extremely strong and unbreakable. And I think that is what's lacking in certain organizations. Do you agree that the reason why certain companies fail, maybe certain cultures are not built, is because they're trying to appease everyone and therefore they don't become, I guess you could say, decisive or clear on taking a stand on one side or the other?
I think that's absolutely true. And I think that's a key part of what we talk about in not only this book, The Cost of Poor Culture, but in some of the other books we've written on culture. And in fact, there was a book that I co-authored in 2012 called Reflective Leaders and High Performance Organizations. And that talked about, the difficulty of being a leader in an organization where, the goal is to do exactly what you're saying, to be honest and upfront and have people build relationships with you. And one of the things we use, it's a fairly well-known model, which is called the task and relationship model. And essentially, we have to achieve a task in business, but we achieve that task in many cases, especially as we're working in the knowledge economy now. We have to achieve that task through working with other people, through relationships. And so the difficulty, the challenge is that so many organizations are heavily task focused on getting the job done. And we have been for so many years. And I think that's especially true in the US, especially true in most Western economies, where we focus on the task. It's all about managing the task. And we do that often to the detriment of building the other side of it, which is the relationships that are necessary to collaborate, communicate, and cooperate to get the collective workforce to achieve the task for the benefit of everybody rather than any one individual. And so it is, how do you build that group consensus, that group belief? And if one is to really get that common ground that you were talking about, Mike, in terms of, there has to be some cohesion and some agreement. There's a lot of stuff talked about in terms of corporate values. And I think it's probably to a degree an overused phrase. But the point is, whilst we may agree on the purpose of our organization or what our task is, very few organizations ever have a conversation about how do we want people to perceive us in how we behave. And it's really that whole foundation of values and belief systems around which we have some degree of commonality about behavior. How are we going to behave? For example, if you and I have a disagreement, and I'm sure we would never agree on everything, the fact is that we may have a disagreement. That disagreement may be very healthy for the organization, to actually bring it up and have a discussion around it. But if that discussion becomes an attack on your personality, on you as an individual, because I don't agree with you, then we're going to destroy any chance of gaining the benefits of the combination of our views and skills and feelings about a particular subject. You may be actually right. And if we can have an open and decent discussion, then what we can do is actually find a common ground probably between the two of us. And I think, it's not only business, we can see that in politics these days. I mean, the reality is that instead of agreeing to disagree and saying that's okay, you have your views, I have my views, I don't agree with you, but that's okay. We immediately attack the other person. And if you're doing that in an organization where you're all trying to achieve a common purpose, it's going to destroy that ability to work effectively together.
Mm. Are there any tricks that you recommend to somebody out there listening? I think I told you before we hit record that the average listener is an entrepreneur looking to start or grow a business. Maybe they're doing 1 to 5 million, somewhere in there, and maybe they have a small organization. And something that I've learned in I've been an entrepreneur since 2009, and my business really started to make money 2016, 2017. And since then, I've become a better leader and now managing multiple people, multiple organizations, different sectors. And I've realized something that has benefited the company. Having different people from different parts of the company get on a weekly call to have a group conversation of what's happening, some of the weaknesses, to kind of see how everybody plays nicely with each other has served us really well. And I look back at my corporate days. I remember having meetings once a week with just the sales team. I was on the sales team. We would never meet with the customer service side or the installers or the inspectors of the home remodeling divisions. And I thought to myself, you know what? If I was going to get the best out of me, I would want to see how I'm affecting all of those people. So I believe whether it was once a week or once a month, it would have been extremely beneficial to have everybody in one room at the same time. So I applied that to my business and I've seen it work very well. It's like there's a community. They see how sending a receipt to an email and who's actually typing it into the QuickBooks matters because they feel like they're a part of a team. That's what I recommend, having the group calls, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, with everybody in the company. But
Yeah.
that's what I've seen work. Any recommendations like that?
Yeah, one of the first recommendations I pick up on a word that you used. You said you used the word, are there any tricks? And that would be sort of my first no, no, no.
No, no tricks, right? It's
Yeah.
not a trick. It's a
Well, the key
habit.
is you've got to be authentic, right? One of the things that will happen, and you know this with any sort of relationship with anybody, as soon as they doubt your authenticity, it's going to be almost impossible to build trust, right? So you have to be who you are. And that is very difficult for some people in leadership positions. I remember once when I took over as president of a distribution business, um, and it was actually just before that was the last job I had before I bailed out on the corporate world and started my own business. I remember the owner of the business, who was the chairman of the board, saying to me, "Now that you've become president of the business, you're going to be you're going to have to be very careful in who you mix with and who you spend time with and who you talk to, because now you have sort of a position." And that was, I think I should have seen the writing on the wall from day one, because 3 years later, I said, I can't do this because basically I'm being put in a position where I can't be authentic out there because I can't be who I am. I can't have discussions out there about what I believe in. All I'm putting forward is the corporate case. And if I don't align and believe in some of the things we're doing corporately, there's no way authentically I can lead the organization and do that. So I think it comes back to leadership skills. If there is one thing I would focus on, it's on the leader of the business remaining authentic and remaining focused on the relationships that exist in the business. It If I look at where it goes wrong, Mike, it very often goes wrong as the business grows and you as the leader, the CEO, starts to lose touch with people because management accountability gets delegated. You bring in managers, you bring in vice presidents, you bring in supervisors, and if they aren't basically singing from the same hymn book as everybody else is singing from, in other words, we're now getting different views and different behaviors and different leadership styles across the organization. People are now going to be getting different messages.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily going to get that authenticity that the CEO may still totally believe in, but it's getting diluted through the organization. So in my culture books, and it's an evolution, you know, as I've gone through the process, I believed in the importance of leadership many years ago, and I've sort of almost come for full circle back to an even greater belief in that. The one key factor is making sure that anybody who's in a leadership position in your organization believes in the things that your organization is trying to do. Because I've often used the expression in change management things in an organization that there are people who will go along with what it is you're trying to do, but don't actually believe in it. And I've used the term corporate terrorists because basically what they are, they're out there in the bushes and they're, to all intents and purposes, they're holding meetings, they're communicating what you want them to communicate, but they don't believe in it, you know, and the people can tell they're not authentic. And so be very, very careful as you grow a business to make sure that you get people in leadership positions that are delivering the same set of values in their messages that you are and you believe in as an organization. How are you going to perpetuate that? I mean, if you go back to what it was in 1949, J&J came out with what they called their credo, and their credo still exists today. And it's a statement of what it is they believe in. Now, if they had a few bumps in the road in the last few years, oh, yeah, they've had a few bumps in the road. But it brings you back to hang on a minute. What is it we're trying to do here? What do we believe in? Where have we gone wrong? And having that honest discussion is a key part of that reflection, like you said, of getting the team together and getting everybody to say what's working, what isn't working, and being prepared to do something about what isn't working.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like one of the ways to keep the culture alive or make sure it grows with the company is promoting within, having lieutenants that are true believers. And I love that phrase, true believer in the mission, in the leader, and therefore they're able to naturally share the message rather than doing it against the current, if you will.
Yeah,
So like memorizing the lines, dressing the part, but not really acting the part. And I think the only way to do that is if you promote from within. And Steve Jobs famously talks about this by hiring an outsider as the CEO of Apple, turning from going from Pepsi CEO to Apple CEO, destroyed the culture. You start to go off track. Many people don't know what the real mission is. It took Steve Jobs coming back to be the visionary that he once was to really guide people to the promised land. They believed in him again, and they believed in his message of thinking it differently. So
yeah,
I believe promoting within is an absolute crucial piece. Now, there are people that I know who are great at growing a business from 0 to 10 million. However, they don't have the skill set or the connections or the ability to go from 10 to 100 million. So there are points where you have to or bring outsiders in to kind of guide you. But maybe there are ways to keep the organization intact by promoting within as along with it. So I like that. Um,
yeah, yeah.
your
You're absolutely right.
your book here, Toxic Culture. What is a toxic culture? What are some signs of it? I would think that gossip, infighting. I mean, there are many signs that I think of, but what's your book, Toxic Culture, about?
Well, to a degree, it picks up on some of the things in the cost report culture, in that you'll typically find a toxic culture is one certainly where people on Sunday night are not looking forward to going to work on Monday. It's not something they look forward to. It's not something they see as a personal challenge. Um, it typically is an organization where that doesn't value diversity, doesn't value fairness, uh, where essentially there are, equity and fairness, as I mentioned, are not practiced in the organization. Typically, you very often see these are organizations that get dragged up before the labor boards and people like that in terms of their labor practices. Um, I think with social media, we tend to find out these days, certainly if you look at things like Glassdoor, you could begin to see the organizations that don't tend to shine through. Now, I realize so many of these things, people will say, well, that's not really reflective. Um, that may be true, but it is an indicator of what's going on in the organization. Um, I would also say, I mean, if a real life example was many years ago, um, General Motors, for example, like many of the North American auto manufacturers, got into serious trouble. And they brought in a guy on the procurement side whose job basically was to beat up on suppliers. And I remember there was an article in the Wall Street Journal at one point in time that was listing the fact that the top 10, they listed the top 10 suppliers to General Motors. Now we're talking probably 20 plus years ago, the top 10 suppliers to General Motors, and 7 of those 10s were in Chapter 11, which tells you something about the degree to which there was a partnership going on there versus leverage of a large organization trying to maximize its advantage with a smaller organization. In other words, it wasn't a win-win scenario. It was a win-lose scenario. And if I'm the large guy with the big stick, I'm going to win.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the very, very difficult changes that we look for in culture is it's got to be a win-win. Sure, I want to get low prices from my suppliers, but my suppliers are also critical to my success. So if you don't, for example, have good supplier relationships in an organization, it's typically a good sign of a toxic culture where we've got issues. Same thing with churn in the on the customer side. If we got, the only way we can keep customers is by low prices, then we face a risk that if an alternative comes along, they're going to jump ship. And so I think building those relationships, poor relationships are a sign of a toxic culture right across the board.
Got it. And it does start with the leader. And the reason why maybe culture takes a back seat is maybe if the leader stops growing, right? Because I think the people are a reflection of the leader. And so it's up to you as the leader of the organization to constantly focus on bettering your skills, right? Becoming more articulate, handling stress, handling your emotions more, maybe surrounding yourself with great players, maybe joining those masterminds or putting yourself in uncomfortable situations for growth. I know that there was a point with my business that I needed 6 to 8 months of like just being able to recuperate and rest from an insane 5 years. And
Yeah.
it took me the mental break of putting myself in the war zone to maybe build up all that stamina again to go right back at it and to level up. So there were these moments where it's like these new chapters, but once I hit it, I was like, you know what? Comfort will kill me. If I stay here, I'm going to die eventually. So it's up to me as the leader to try something new, to become more. And that's going to feel uncomfortable no matter where you're at, but it's better for the company to see transformation, to see growth. Otherwise, it becomes stale, and nobody wants to be a part of a company that's stale. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, in terms of putting yourself in an uncomfortable position, I think that is a very much a key leadership skill. I remember watching a video of a senior management. This was a guy in actually in the public sector, but he was talking about transformation in government. And he said one of the most challenging things to him as a manager was that it put him in a maximum area of discomfort because what he was having to do was to give up the perception that he actually had control of his own destiny and recognized that it was actually the people working for him that determined eventually how successful he was going to be as a manager. And so he essentially, through delegating authority to people and allowing them to come up with ideas, listening to them, we hear a lot about the voice of the employee these days. A manager at any level has to be willing to listen to and act on what they're hearing from the organization, to build that credibility we're talking about. You were talking about earlier about promoting from within. One of the key values about promoting from within is not only that we tend to perpetuate the culture, but we also tend to have people that understand the way that the business integrates and operates across all the different functions. And one of the big problems is today we bring in, people who don't have cross-functional experience. They've probably grown up in a particular silo of an organization. And much as we like to think about it, we tend to color our decision making around the area that we're most comfortable in. And so if I'm a finance guy, no matter how good a finance guy I am, if I haven't had experience in working in areas other than finance, there is a significant risk that I may have a blind spot in terms of my decision making because of my background. And this incidentally goes back to the point that you made, which is if you surround yourself with people who have different views of the world and different experiences, and you're willing to work together to share those experiences and banter back and forth about what you think, what I think, how we should do this, what decision we should make. Unless you're willing to do that, which can be for many people uncomfortable, then you're not going to get the benefits of this sort of systemic approach to running an organization.
Mm. Yeah, I think this comes from your other book, maybe Reflective Leaders and High Performance Organizations. But there are people who are, results driven, but that maybe the results are metrics, financial figures, all that. They see that. That's the tangibles. Many people disregard the intangibles. How do people feel when they get on that Zoom call, join the organization, go to work every day?
Yeah.
That culture means something, not only for the beginning, but the longevity of them being there and the output. There's that great phrase, quiet quitting. People might be there, but in their mind, if an opportunity came right on their desk today and it was to leave for a little bit more money somewhere else, they'd go. But if you have a great culture, individuals will have buy-in day in and day out, and therefore they could maybe see themselves working there for the rest of their life, or they see what they're building and they're building something that they're able to reap the rewards from financially, but also internally. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people disregard that, and maybe it's because they are focusing on the wrong things, right? I don't know. Have you noticed that there are certain people who value the culture more than the money, and therefore the money's the byproduct, and it does produce a better result than focusing on the metrics?
I think so. I mean, there are certainly organizations out there that have, and of course, it's typically in a discussion like this, the name of the company goes out of your head completely. Um, oh, anyway, it's gone. But yes, I mean, there are clear cases of organizations where um, valuing the culture and valuing the behavior and not doing things a certain way, not just following the numbers. And I think that is really I guess the best way to come back around and answer that question is to say that was the whole reason I wrote the book of the cost of poor culture, because what we don't see is we don't see that bridge being built between the importance of building an effective culture in an organization and the financial benefits that that culture is going to bring you. One of the big problems we don't see is we don't see the negative impacts of a poor culture because it's like built into that's what it costs me to run the business today. You touched on something interesting. You were saying about this sort of the walking wounded or whatever we refer to them as.
Quiet quitting.
Um,
That's good.
yeah,
Walking
quiet
wounded. I
quitting,
like that. I actually
quiet
never
quitting.
heard
Yeah,
that.
But there was a study, a UK study I was reading a couple of days ago, and they used a term that I hadn't come across before. We've heard of absenteeism, right? When people just don't turn up for work. They call it presenteeism. In other words, they've turned up for work, but they're not there, which is kind of an interesting term. And they were talking about, and this is one of the things I'm working on a second edition of the Cost of Poor Culture right now. One of the things that is becoming more and more popular is the cost of conflict in a business. Not only the cost of conflict from things like mental health point of view, but actually what it is costing the organization for time wasted. If you look at, there was a study done in 2008 by an organization in the US called CPP that they're the people behind Myers-Briggs and some of the testing tools that are available out there. And they used a number, I think, that was, if I remember, is around $359 billion is what conflict costs the US economy. And that was, as I say, in 2008. And what we're beginning to see is that there's sort of an escalation in the demand for mediation services so that people will come into your organization as consultants and help mediate the conflicts that are taking place in the organization. To me, that's kind of like in the old days of quality management, where we had people come in and do rework because we had problems with the product we were producing. Today's rework is, in fact, mediation, because if we had the right people and the right values in the organization and the right behaviors being exhibited, we wouldn't need mediation. Right? So in effect, we're looking at the cost of mediation as a sort of corrective cost to fix the problem. Whereas if we'd have used the amount we're spending on mediation to spend on doing better hiring, better development of our leaders and things like that, we'd be cutting those causes of the conflict off before they happen. That's where we need to go. I mean, we need to be investing in the preventative costs associated with creating a good culture rather than reacting to the negative impacts of when it happens. I mean, if you go back to my book, The Cost of Poor Culture, one of the things I point out is the size of fees and penalties that are being paid by businesses these days because they get themselves into court. There's an organization out of Washington called Violation Tracker. Very, very good organization. And what they do is they track all regulatory fees and penalties from all the different agencies in the US. And in writing the Cost of Poor Culture book, they were kind enough to share their information with me. And I was staggered when I first looked at the spreadsheet of the data that they sent me. There was 439,000 line entries on the worksheet of individual court cases that have been brought against US corporations and international corporations working in the US for essentially violations of regulatory requirements. Now, and some of those amount to billions of dollars. If you look at the banking industry, I mean, it's one great example of where it's become very expensive. And sadly, for many businesses, fines and penalties have sort of become the cost of doing business. They're not really cleaning up their act. They're just saying, let's pay the final penalty and move on. We've got some great examples like the Wells Fargo saga of some years ago, when they were selling services to customers or theoretically charging customers for services that they had never asked for. And it was being driven by the incentive plan inside the business. And it cost, I think, in excess of $1.5 billion in terms of fines and penalties to Wells Fargo. Well, that's money that comes out of the potential pot to pay people. It also comes out of the potential pot to give money back to the shareholders. So, I mean, to me, that's all wasted money. It's all the cost of poor culture. And just one little aside on the positive, the New York Federal Reserve started some years ago a department looking at culture in the banking industry. And they're doing some really, really good work in terms of trying to understand how this relationship, how this culture side of the business impacts the whole functioning of the banking industry. So I mean, there is a movement out there. I mean, there are people waking up to the fact that this is important, but it's pretty slow. And the in business, the desire to create wealth and make money is still eclipsing a little bit the importance of culture.
Something I've read recently, and I guess maybe I'm just around many individuals who are starting businesses, so I picked up on it. But there are a lot of people out there saying you got to go after A players, A players. Well, some of the people I've been listening to and reading about, they actually look for B or C players, and they will turn them into A players. And the reason why is because they live by the philosophy you hire based on character and then you train for skill. And that is the greatest return on investment. Not only because of the relationships you build, you're able to take someone who might not be the fastest swimmer, but help them become the fastest swimmer. And so you're actually leveling up their skill and they appreciate that more. So I've adopted that. And I think that I was always a BC player until I found the world of entrepreneurship. And then I was able to run faster than I've ever run before. And that's why I love it so much. So that's what I look for. I look for people who have a great character. And I don't really care about their skill set, really. I think I can train for skill set based off of my needs or for the business or for the client's needs. And so I look for character. I'm looking for that type of person that I can work with, have fun with, build this stuff with. And I think that has served us very well. Do you agree with that sentiment? Is that one of the great takeaways in your book?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. One of the phrases, in fact, I use is it's amazing what great things can be done by teams of average people.
Yeah.
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 I
Yep.
mean, it's all about leadership and motivation. I mean, at the end of the day, the majority of the population is average. You know, if you look at the graph, you know, most of us are sitting around that midpoint somewhere. And so, you know, I think occasionally you do need stars in certain areas, no question about it. But again, you need stars. You need the Wayne Gretzkys that are the ones that are able to pass the puck to somebody else to score the goal, right?
Right.
And are willing to do that. And that's what's being critical. Uh, a place that you might come across this is I don't know whether you ever read the book. There was some years ago called First Break All the Rules, What Great Managers Do.
No, I like it though. Like the
It
title.
was it was written by somebody called Buckingham, and there was another author. I forget the other author, but both of them at the time they wrote the book were working with Gallup. And Gallup have been doing some really, really good work on employee engagement for 20 plus years. And they wrote this book on some of the early work that Gallup had done in trying to go out and measure employee engagement. And one of the things that they said was exactly, you know, the point that you're making. You hire for the quality of the individual and you look for the right fit, right? And you can, once you get the right fit, in other words, you can't train people to behave well, but you can train people with the skills necessary to do the job.
Yep.
So it's all about underlying beliefs, values, and behaviors. That's what we're hiring for. And what we're going to do is to create a workplace that is highly motivational for these right people to then collaborate and cooperate to get the job done. Incidentally, Mike, that was the reason that the book I did after the Cost of Poor Culture was called, oh, geez, isn't that terrible? The Workplace
You have too many books.
Yeah, too many books. The Workplace Battlefield. Because for many people going to work, that's what it is. It's a battlefield. And the analogy that I use, if you think about your furnace or whatever you have at home, where essentially the air passes through it and it's a filter and it gets cleaned. In other words, it stops all the crud getting into your heating system. Culture is like a corporate filter. If you've got a negative culture and you've got talent, you're going out there and buying talent, the talent arrives at the workplace and it goes, wow, this is a great workplace. I've immediately been welcomed. I've got the right tools to do the job. There aren't procedures and things getting in the way of me doing the job. People are willing to collaborate with me and cooperate. There's great communications. I can get out there now and use my talent and bring results to the business. Versus they get there, there's no orientation program. Basically, they're shown where their desk is. They're shown how to sign on to the computer. And they go and try and get some help from somebody. And they said, well, that's not my responsibility. That's not part of my job. I'm too busy doing something else right now. And it's like a blocked filter. And essentially, that's what a poor culture is. A poor culture is what stops the talent that you're hiring working together to deliver the results you want. The cleaner the screen, the better the culture. So essentially, I identify half a dozen things that get in the way. Poor leadership and management is one of the key ones. Poor behavior is another one. Not having the right tools and equipment to get the job done is another one. Excess bureaucracy is another one. So there are 6 key points around, what sort of things happen in a poor culture. And that's why, this whole area of talent management, everybody's saying going out and hiring the best talent. Well, I would say exactly the point that you're making, Mike. Yes, we want talented individuals in the organization, but I'm far more interested in creating a workplace where essentially those talented people that I hire can allow all their talent to flow to the work front, because that's what's not happening today in organizations. I talked about Gallup earlier. They've just come out with their 2023 World Workplace review. And they said globally, the cost of disengagement with employees is $8.8 trillion. In the US, it's $2.8 trillion.
Oh, man.
That is what we're leaving on the table. I mean,
Oof,
we're spending that money today, but we're not getting the benefit from it.
oof.
So lack of engagement. I mean, I don't know whether you know what the numbers are right now, but globally, the numbers are in the mid to high 20%. In other words, for most organizations, around 20% of the 70% of the workforce is not engaged. They are the walking wounded. They are the corporate terrorists. They're the ones that they go to work, they collect their paycheck, they do their job, and that's exactly what it is. They do a job. They don't have the passion. They don't have, God, yeah, I'm here because I have a passion for what I'm doing. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, their life is on autopilot, and yeah, that's costing your business. Therefore,
No question.
it's in your best interest to keep them engaged. The way I think what you just said there hits home. Behavior is the most important piece. You could always train for skill, and made me think of a quote. I don't know where I've heard it, but when it comes to hiring, nature is more important than nurture, right? Who are they as a being, as a person?
Yeah.
Nature far exceeds nurture because you can nurture their skills, and that is, I guess, the job of a leader and of a great organization. Beautiful,
It was
beautiful.
absolutely. When I took over as president of that company I was telling you about, we had a number of branches through we were doing business in the different provinces, like in the different states in the US. And we had one particular branch manager. I won't mention the area or anything else about him, but he had a reputation of being certainly some vice presidents saw this guy as a troublemaker, because they said every time we give him a direction from head office, he pushes back on it. And so when I got appointed president, somebody said to me, the first thing you need to do is to fire this guy. And I said, well, why would I fire him? He said, well, he's a problem. He's a problem guy. I said, have you ever looked at the results of his branch? He's one of the best performers in the organization. I said, you often find that when you've got somebody who pushes back, they push back for a
They
reason.
care. It's because they
Yeah,
care.
yeah, they're going to argue with you and say, no, that's not the right thing to do. Why should we do that? I'm not going to do that in my branch. And you see, this hits right back at the role of management versus the role of leadership. A manager would react in many cases by saying, look, I'm your boss, do it that way, which is immediately saying whatever value you have about your local knowledge of your market,
Doesn't
of
matter.
your products, of your staff, of your customers, is of no value in this discussion. I know better because I'm your manager.
Yep.
And
And as time goes on, they will stop coming up with ideas. They will stop fighting for their beliefs. They will stop
absolutely,
thinking about slaying that dragon, and they will start to quietly quit.
you got it.
Bingo.
Absolutely.
Oh, I
And
love
so,
that. Go ahead.
one of the tough things about management is that, people are emotional and they're going to react emotionally to certain things. And you're going to have those discussions from the point of view that that is exactly what you said, Mike. They have the reaction because they care. And what more could you wish for in an organization than actually having people who care about what you're doing and want to deliver results for you?
That's it. Meh. It's good.
One of the reasons I bailed out corporately is I got tired of stupid decisions. I'll tell you one thing, this guy, God bless him, has passed away now. He was vice chairman of the board. And as I said, I was in the mainframe computer business. And when some of the first PCs came out, I wanted to buy some PCs for my financial analysts. And so I think these were, if I don't know if any of your listeners will remember, they were Zenith Z80s, and they were green screens with two floppy drives, and they were the beginning of the beginning, but they had spreadsheets on them. They were phenomenal.
Game
And
changers.
so
Yeah.
my financial analysts, we could save so much time with these things. And they cost $5,000 at the time. And so I requisitioned two of these things, which you have to do through the corporate bureaucracy. And I got back, it was declined by corporate, by the head office. And it was signed off by the vice chairman of the board, who said, personal computers will never amount to anything. If you want to use spreadsheets, we have applications on our mainframe computers. So here was a leader in the computer industry telling me that PCs would never replace the mainframe computer.
Hilarious.
And this is somebody at the board level. So you go, oh, I think we may be in strategic trouble here.
Uh, Nick, I could talk to you for hours, man. I like your philosophy on things. I love how you emphasize the importance of culture. I think that my team has really not only just adopted the culture, but really, spread it. Because what's cool about it is if you have a great culture, they start to refer their friends and family to join the organization. And
Yeah,
I've seen that.
yeah,
So guys,
yeah.
take note of this. Pick up his books. I have a hard stop here. I have a meeting in a few minutes, but his books are on Amazon. He has many of them. I thought it was just one when I first met him, but guys, look up Toxic Culture, The Cost of Poor Culture, Understanding and Reporting Human Capital, I believe is one of them.
Yep.
And what's the other one you just talked about? The Workplace Battlefield. So he has written many over the past 3, 4 years because of COVID, I guess. So look him up. Nick, is there any way that people can reach you on social media quite easily?
The best way is my publishing arm is called Janus Publications, JANNAS Publications.com. And it's Nick at januspublications.com. So they can meet me there. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can look me up on LinkedIn. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. So some of those things they should certainly be able to find me on.
Excellent. A lot of great nuggets in this. And if you're watching this live and you missed the beginning, go back and listen to it. There's a few pieces that he said that you should adopt and apply to any business, no matter how big or small. So, Nick Shepard, thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate your time.
Pleasure, Mike. Thanks for doing what you're doing for us.
All right. Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life. Right on.